Welcome. Good to have you here, Simone. Thank you to those joining us on the live stream. My name is Lyle McKenzie. My pronouns are he, him. I'm one of the co-pastors here, together with Pastor Lyndon, who is running the live stream tonight. We want to begin by acknowledging with respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional lands we gather, and including the Songhees, the Esquimalt, and the Wisanich nations, and the continuing work that we have to do together for right relationships on these lands and in care for these lands. I'm going to introduce Suzanne Standeven from the Social Justice Committee, who will introduce our guest and say a little bit more about the evening. Just one comment, and that is that for those who are on the live stream, and we'll remind you later as well, we invite you to enter your questions into the chat so that we can relay those to Simone as part of the evening. Okay? Suzanne.
Thank you, Pastor Lyle and Pastor Lyndon, for taking care of the technical part of this evening. I'm just going to do a little bit about the format for tonight. Just for anybody that's in person here, the bathrooms are behind the hallway there. After an introduction to Simone, we will start watching the documentary ourselves right here, and then start into the Q&A with Simone. So those at home, when we finish the introduction, please feel free to watch the documentary and then join us when you are able. So for Simone, Simone is a doula, dancer, and director based in Victoria, BC. And Simone was born in Toronto, Ontario, but she moved to Victoria in 2014 to attend the university here in Victoria, where she completed degrees in gender studies and Indigenous studies. And since 2015, she has facilitated workshops about reproductive justice and social justice in dance for many institutions and organizations, including workshops about the Métis culture. She is the director of the documentary that we will be watching tonight, Dance Like Everybody is Watching. The film has been recognized in the local community as an incredible teaching tool about race and dance. And her work also focuses on reproductive justice for marginalized communities and decolonizing the dance community. Over the past 5 years, she has delivered workshops about reproductive justice and supported families in the postpartum period. And without any more comment from me, I'd like to introduce Simone Blais, and we're just delighted to have you, Simone, and I'll get you to introduce your film. Thank you.
Is this working? Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody who's joining here and joining on the live as well. I really appreciate you making it. We're just talking about the gas shortage and, you know, all the tough things going on, so I appreciate you coming out. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. My name is Simone Blais. I'm the director and producer of this film, Dance Like Everybody's Watching. I'll keep my introduction very brief because we're gonna, go into sort of the meat of it and how it was created and everything afterwards. But a few things about it. It's a Story Hive funded film, so we received funding in 2019, I believe, for the creation of this film. It got cut short because of COVID, so I'm sure, COVID put a damper on all of our plans. It was meant to be a feature length, and it ended up being a 30-minute film. But I actually think that was meant to be because it's ended up being a really amazing length to do workshops like this. So I've done over 25 workshops from middle schools to local community groups, and it's a really nice length to be able to, get into the meat of it, digest a lot of content packed into 30 minutes, and then also have some time to, just work through kind of the concepts in it and have some good discussions. So, I'm excited to hear what you all think, and I may be ducking out to the bathroom periodically because despite making this, I hate the sound of my voice. It's like when you listen to your voice in the voicemail and you're like, oh my goodness. So, but I will be here, and I'll definitely be here once it's done. So, thank you, and without further ado. Hey, girl.
Hey, babe. Are you gonna do it?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it.
Hell yeah, you are.
Spit fire when I walk in the room, room. Just like dynamite, go boom, boom. Sweep up the hate like boom, boom. Sit tight, we gon' ride like zoom, zoom. Spit fire when I walk in the room, room. Just like dynamite, go boom, boom. Sweep up the hate like boom, boom. Sit tight, we gon' ride like zoom, zoom. Work, 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 yeah, we got it like that. Work, 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 yeah, we got it like that. Big vibe, come through, step up or step back. Work, 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 yeah, we got it like that. Ooh, big move, let me tell you how we do. Catwalk strut, Riri, attitude, huh? Hustler, making moves on the loose. Buckle up, we sweet like sugar cane juice. Elevate, yeah, we elevate, swag up while we sippin' lemonade, skin brown like a cinnamon cake. Yo, roll up the track, DJ, let me sing.
Hey sis, I'm gonna send you voice notes because I am too lazy to text. Victoria's been good to me. It's so refreshing out here. It's like a million trees. Definitely not Toronto. It feels like a really small city, but school is good, and I love my teachers, my courses. I've been running, and it helps, but I really miss dance. Checked out a bunch of the studios. Honestly, it's so hard to find a black dance teacher here though. There's one dance teacher I know of right now, and I'm taking her classes. They're really good. Sometimes it feels like everybody's staring, and then other times it feels like nobody sees me at all. I don't know any other black dancers, but I know I can't be the only one. You know what? I'm gonna look for them here in Victoria.
Oh my God, it's not easy being a black lady in Canada. I can tell you that, most especially in Victoria, where when black people see each other, they go like, hi, because it's probably been 3 days since they've seen another black person.
So Victoria is very close to Seattle. It's on the west coast. It is close to Vancouver, but it's located on an island just off of both of those places.
I came to Victoria because of school. I came to do my master's degree at Royal Roads University. Yeah, it was fun. It wasn't what I expected though.
When we moved here, we were looking for quote unquote a black community, and that doesn't exist here. Like the communities and like collectives of black folk, it's more existing in these like small pockets and kind of orbiting around each other, but there isn't a centralized space where you can connect.
Like Vancouver is all big and multicultural, but like if you go into like the little towns or like if you go up island, not really the best place for people that look like us.
I often chat with friends and I'm like, yeah, it's time, we gotta get out of Victoria. We gotta like go on a trip or go somewhere, because I feel myself going brown girl crazy. Like I feel that kind of disconnection from the history of my culture that's here. As a black dancer, like when I talk about, you know, the idea of being brown girl crazy, like part of that is once again not seeing yourself validated, and once again not seeing some people that are like you or cultures that align with yours reflected. not seeing the way that you shape the world, and feeling empowered because you know that you can participate in shaping the world, and that you know that your ancestors were a part of this.
Because people that finally learn how to dance either leave the city and go somewhere else to go teach their dance, to go try to join a group in Edmonton.
In Victoria, it is a challenge because so much of Black culture has been absorbed into the mainstream. However, we don't, in Victoria, have a large Black population. And so what you end up having is generally teachers that are not Black, that are teaching dances that are a part of Black history and Black contemporary context. But so the dancers are kind of divorced of the culture altogether, you know? And I think that's why there's discomfort around talking about the history. There's discomfort when a student shows up in class that is Black if the teacher isn't Black, because I hear that story over and over again as well.
Hey sis, it's been a minute. How you doing? Yeah, I mean, what I'm finding now is that Victoria actually has a lot of African and hip-hop dance classes, but they're all taught by white people, so it's definitely a different vibe. I'm actually going up to interview one of the dance teachers right now, so wish me luck. Okay, check in soon. Bye.
So my name's Lynn Weaver. I'm the artistic director of Moondance Dynamic Arts School. I grew up in rural southern Alberta, not a very diverse community, but that is where I was first exposed to West African dance. I was connected to a jazz dance company, and the founders of the company went to West Africa in search of the roots of jazz and came back so excited and brought literally just a cassette recording of the drumming, and we were all listening like, that, you know, the really bad sound quality, so we could hardly even hear what it was, but their spark sort of led the journey from there. They brought in a company from the States, and as soon as I felt that in my own body, the movements with the live percussion, was like, I mean, literally changed the direction of my whole life. When we had that first workshop, I had come straight from a ballet class. I was like in bodysuit and tights, hair in a bun. I was like, you want me to do what? You know, in that sort of ballet body. And so it was so transformative to feel a more grounded shape in my body. And again, just with the live percussion, I was hooked. So the first time I went to Guinea, I went with Abubakar and stayed with his sister and brother-in-law. So it was culturally, I would say, as different as you can get from Canada as possible. Our dance school that's been going for 20 years now is Moondance Dynamic Arts School, based around the idea of cultural arts, but specifically dance from Guinea, which is where my heart resides. But the idea of any cultural dances held by community rather than dance for an audience, you know, a division between performer and recipient. Instead, dance that is vernacular, that belongs to everyone. Yeah, I mean, it's open to anyone to participate in, just that, as we say, it's not a very diverse community, so it tends to
reflect the nature of the community, right? I think it resonates with a lot of people that we are so respectful of the culture and so mindful of carrying on our lineage of teachers, that it's not in any way cultural appropriation. You know, I teach the dances as I've been taught and with permission from my teachers to be sharing them. We also did a lot of workshops for the African Heritage Society, working with kids that had been adopted out of Africa, and so they had lost a lot of cultural ties and community ties. So, you know, for what it was worth, we tried to plant a seed there and you know, have that spark, have them exposed to some more of African arts.
Hey sis, so the interview actually went really well. She's such a sweet person, like she's so welcoming and generous. Yeah, I mean, it's also kind of complicated, I guess. There's a lot of Black people that I know who don't have access to African culture at all, so it feels kind of weird when I see white people that are so immersed in the culture. But I'm gonna go and talk to Devi about it. He always has good things to say. All right, talk soon. Bye, sis.
I forget who said this, but it was an amazing quote where, you know, they said basically language and all these different things, it doesn't fully grasp the fact that racism is a visceral experience.
Yes.
That it is a bodily experience.
Yes, absolutely.
And one of the reasons that I was so keen to come and talk to you is because you talk about that in ways, and when we left the interview that we did up in Shawnigan Lake with a white dance teacher who teaches West African dance to a primarily white group of people, she was saying everything right and everything was so perfect, yet I had this visceral bodily, like I was just mad.
Yes, yes.
And even when our brains can grasp that maybe something's fine, we have that bodily experience. I'm wondering if you can talk about like where that comes from, because I'm trying to locate why that's happening for me.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things that I've come to sort of understand, so I teach a course on decolonizing racialized bodies, and really what I'm trying to sort of capture is this idea that colonialism was about colonizing lands and bodies, right? And so it's about taking bodies, erasing bodies, you know, stripping bodies of culture, of languages, and dance is culture, it is language, its spirituality is connected to our dance. So dance, really, if you look at it at its most core, most fundamental level, it is governance.
Freedom, can nobody take my freedom? And then you let when I step in a spot, then I pop like a melanin drop. No. Freedom, can nobody take my freedom? And then you let me when I step in a spot, then I pop like a melanin drop. No limit, no. No limit, no. I pop like a melanin drop. No limit, no. I said I pop like a melanin drop.
Yeah, that's the thing too about the hip-hop dancing is it really lets you release yourself and, you know, just, yeah.
So sharp.
Exactly.
Like, boom,
yeah,
everyone hit
everyone
that
at
beat.
the same time.
You know that was rehearsed at least 500 times.
Yeah,
to reach that precision.
Yeah, we would have
exactly.
to, like, we would do it when we're, like, practicing for competitions, but as I said, like, we have to keep on doing the dance over and over and over and over again.
Jump around. Jump around.
I like this too.
Jump up and get down.
My phone's still working.
I like this type of dance.
the facial expressions. Like she's really good at dramatizing things.
Right. I just love the movements, like just like the style of movements and everything. I feel like that was why it was so easy. Hey.
Get a little bit of a solo.
Just solo.
I first started dancing when I was about 12 years old, grade 7 in Campbell River. We moved to Victoria and we found a studio that would be suitable for the genre that I'm interested in, hip hop. And that experience was pretty interesting and dynamic because when I first came in, I was about 14 and just kind of not comfortable in my own skin yet. Growing up, reflecting on my experiences, I feel as if I had to kind of change the way I talked or the way I moved around spaces in order to break in a little bit easier. Did things that kind of downplayed my blackness in a way. You know, I really wanted to fit in with my friends, I really wanted to be liked. I asked my mom for so long, can I get my hair relaxed? Can I get my hair relaxer, the chemical and stuff? And for a long time, my mom said, no, it's gonna damage your hair. You have such nice hair. No, it's gonna damage your hair. I finally did, but reflecting back, I think part of the main reason why I wanted my hair to be relaxed is to break into those groups, you know, so I could fit into the white European standards in these groups. And it was also just weird too, looking back, I was obviously young, so I didn't have any kind of my awareness of me as a black person obviously came with age. And just how people wore blackness as a costume over there, but it was weird, they would have this whole persona of being all hood and gritty and hip hop, but then they'd leave and be, a typical white Victoria Caucasian person looking a little bit on the preppy side.
When it comes to dance, I think I dance quite well.
So I see where Jasmine gets it from then.
Yeah, it runs in the family.
In these spaces, our black bodies are desired for their labor, and our culture is only acceptable when whiteness can consume it, right? And so when we're here and we're trying to find ways to affirm who we are, when I think of cultural appropriation, it's the ability to go and take other people's culture and use it for your own ends, right? And so I think of that, for example, I think of white people and the ability to go and take black culture and black dance. They don't have to live that experience. That culture is a bracketed experience. They get to say, hey, I want to do black dance. Right? And they get to wear the paraphernalia. They get to perform blackness on stage as loud and as furious as they want. But then when it's done, they get to brush it off. They get to take it off. They get to leave it on stage. Right? And then they walk away with do you know what I mean? There is no fiduciary, and even if there was, it's the ability to leave it, right? I don't get to leave it.
Hey sis. Wow, it's been quite the journey. I went to go and see Devi, and I saw his daughter dance. She's so good. I also got to interview Terry and Kemi and Jasmine. Truthfully, this process of coming together to listen to their stories has just been powerful. And I know there isn't a huge number of us here, but we're up to some big things. And I think the city just needs to step aside and make some room. Because we're here.
You ready to enter this shot?
Okay, so how do I start?
How you feel about this party?
Oh.
Out of 10?
Yeah.
Okay, this party, well, you know, you guys, more people could have turned up. Like, let's be
Yeah?
frank. Yeah.
I mean,
I feel like there's hella people in there.
There is like quite a lot of people.
No, there is
it could have
quite a
been like
lot.
more packed though. Like I feel like that's always a thing in Victoria. Like people in Victoria are still ready to go to bed. You know? like I
told you, but I feel like there's hella black people here though.
Yeah, there.
That's nice. Do you know
The
most of
hospitality
them?
of the party is a 10.
Okay.
The what of it?
The hospitality of the party, how friendly the party is,
Yep.
is a 10.
Yeah.
Come on, give them that. They're like, they got a kitchen in there.
Oh, come on.
They're all, it's
You should
epic,
give
there's
me a
art.
five-star
It's
review on
beautiful
Yelp.
in there.
This is a black people
Yelp
party
that.
for you.
Nah.
We cook.
Compliments.
I thought he was a yelper.
Thank you. Oh. Well,
Anywho, moving right
Yeah.
along.
you would think a lot more people would show up.
It's
Yeah,
true.
but I feel like the communities here are like so stratified is the problem. Like there's the black people that go to UVic,
Yeah.
and then there's the
Nigerian
black people who have
church,
families,
black
the black people that hang out
That's how I
at
met you.
there's definitely like different like social groups of black people, and like we're bad at meshing. Do you know what I mean? Like it's hard.
I think
it's
that
hard.
is
People
actually-
stick in their circles.
That's true. DDA's like, yep. DDA's like, it's true.
Why isn't all the different black community groups paying one person to call everybody?
Okay, but I think that that's like a moot point because
That's not a moot point.
No, it is a moot point. Like paying somebody to call
Can you
people, but I think what I'm trying to say is like we don't need to be asking the community for money. Like the government needs to be funding the community building.
This man has the best and craziest ideas.
But I know your fingers must be like fighting you right now.
It's a little bit
He's like,
cold,
what
yeah.
fingers? Do I have those still?
It's all good. Like I think I'm good. You feel like
Is it on? Yeah? Check 1 2 1 2. Yeah? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that was my film. I will talk a little bit more about how it came to be, and then we'll kind of delve into it. But I mentioned it was a Story Hive funded film, so I kind of had this idea for a long time. There was a lot of conversations in like popular culture around like cultural appropriation. There was a lot of conversations around hair and around Halloween and who could wear what costumes and who could wear what hairstyles. And during that time, I had just sort of moved to Victoria, and so as you saw in the film, you know, kind of experiencing that culture shock of like, oh, okay, this is really different. And I was in these dance classes, and it felt like my little microcosm of the world that I could like handle. Like, I can't really speak to everything, but like the dance world I really know. And so I had the idea many years ago to like write a paper, or, you know, like I just wanted to do something with the topic. And then I saw Story Hive, which, by the way, if any of you are interested in making films, they fund up-and-coming, they really want to fund emerging filmmakers, so like people like me who had like no experience, but they like to fund potential. And so we created an application. We had like a very small team of really me and two of the other folks who you saw. And we submitted the application, and we were really proud of it. And then we went online because there were 30 projects to be funded. 15 were going to be by crowd votes, so you could like go and get your friends to vote on Facebook, that kind of thing. And 15 were going to be by jury. And so I was like, okay, I got to go find my application, like send it to everybody. And so I'm on the page, and I'm like, scrolling, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's the next page, scrolling, and I'm like, how many applications? There was like 400 applications, 300, 400. So I was like, okay, well, it was a good exercise in writing a grant application. Clearly I won't get it, but you know, it's like good practice anyways. And then that July I got the email and we got funded. So they wouldn't tell me for some reason whether I was chosen out of jury or crowd votes, but I have a feeling it was crowd votes because the community here locally like really came through. Like I was on the bus and people who I just, you know, worked with years ago would be like, hey, I like voted for your film. So it was definitely a bit of a labor of love in terms of the local Victoria community coming together as well and voting for it. Yeah, like I mentioned as well, it was meant to be a feature length and, you know, got cut short because of COVID, but I feel like that was kind of meant to be anyways. And yeah, since finishing the film, I've done a ton of workshops, pretty much all online because of Zoom. So this is actually one of my first in-person screenings, which is really cool. Yeah, so I would love to open it up to like whether you have any questions about the content or making it or anything like that. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Simone. It was a really professional feel to it, so it was beautiful.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions that came, you know, thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was maybe more technical, related to the filmmaking, which is this idea of leaving a phone message for somebody, which was kind of telling the story. So if you can talk about that a little. And the other question is from inside the film, which was, it was the comment about, I hope that the city will give us some space or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know really what that means, or if you have any, you know, can elaborate on what, how this community or Victoria as a larger community could give space.
Wow, wonderful questions. Thank you. So yeah, to your first question, yeah, that was a really interesting process because when I started out, I really didn't want to be in the film. As you can tell, I'm like, don't want to hear my voice or anything. And so I wanted to be that like classic sort of documentary style where you're just sort of like behind the camera and, you know, I don't have a voice, but I'm just like kind of portraying what's happening. And we were finding it really hard to find a way to weave everything together. Like there was a lot of content, but it was kind of this question of like, what is the thread? You know, like it's like, why is all this content being strung together? And like, you know, for what reason is this being made? And I had just finished my, in 2020, I finished my degree, and so was learning a lot about like Indigenous research methodologies and gender studies, talking about like doing ethical research. And so I was really seeing the documentary as research. You know, I'm researching this question of what does Black dance look like in the city? And I was like, okay, how can I do this in a way that's ethical? And it kind of ended up coming to a place where I was like, I have to put myself in it. Because if I'm going to put, people up on this screen and I'm going to ask them tough questions and I'm going to, question the things that they say, I also ethically feel like I need to be in there and also making myself vulnerable and, saying like, I also don't have all the questions and I'm also learning and, hopefully, giving myself grace and giving the participants grace in, dealing with kind of the tough things. And I was recording, sort of classic narrator style, and it was just not working. Like, it sounded so forced. Like, it sounded like I was trying to be some, like, BBC News person. Like, I didn't have a reference point for how to, like, do it in a way that felt natural. And so it was Peduzzo, actually, who did the cinematography, who said, well, because we always communicate through WhatsApp. He's from Brazil. And we always just send each other voice notes because it's just, like, quicker. And he was like, well, why don't you just send voice notes? He's like, okay, just send me what you would say, but, like, actually just send it to me so it'll feel realer. And so I would send him I would watch the clips, and then we'd have our little transition moments, and then I would, like, send him a voice note, and he was like, that's perfect. That's it. But then he was like, maybe, make it like you're sending it to your sister or something, so it's a little bit more realistic, like you're not, making the film. And so, that's how that came to be. Yeah, and it ended up, I like how it, I think it created a feel of being a little bit, like, kind of intimate, like you're listening in on a personal conversation sort of thing. And to your second question, I'll answer it in the honest way, and then I'll answer it in the, like, probably the way I should answer it way, but the honest answer is I really didn't know how to wrap up the film. Like, I really, really struggled with, I think I entered it wanting to, find the answer to who could and couldn't teach Black dance. Is it appropriate for white folks to be teaching hip hop or for white folks to be teaching West African dance? I didn't really get into it as much, but within the Black community here, it is quite polarized, and some people are like, absolutely not, and some people are like, yeah, sure, it's fine. So I think I kind of wanted to, like, find the answer to it, and in doing the research and interviewing a lot of people, there was no consensus. And some folks were like, yeah, it's great, some people were like, absolutely not. And so, I kind of came to the end of the film, and I was like, I can't wrap this up with a neat bow. And I can't really be like, here it is. And so I had to find a way to I wanted to finish with something, like, positive, with something, like, hopeful, and with something kind of actionable, because I think that's useful. And I think it was, like, a general sentiment around, like, I think sometimes there's a drive to, like, create new initiatives and things like that around race, but I guess I wanted to speak to the fact that, like, there are Black people in this city who are already doing things, and just instead tapping into that and, like, supporting the ongoing existing work instead of like, creating new things. So I think that's kind of where that sentiment was coming from. I definitely, like, watching it now, I'm like, I think I'd probably finish it with a different line. But maybe that's for my next project. It's like just watching your own work. You're like, oh my God. Yeah, thanks for your questions.
Simone, I had a question. You talk about the teachers who are Black versus non-Black teachers. So my question is more as a participant, because I had the privilege of learning to do some African drumming, not in Victoria, and it was a profoundly moving experience for me, the rhythm and just the physical and emotional feeling and connection. It's so hard to describe unless you actually do it. And out of that came these other wonderful experiences, which I'm not going to go into, but it's something I want to take up in Victoria. But how do I do that in a way that is respectful and honors the culture behind it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, like, I'll start by saying, like, there's nothing wrong with, like, participating in and, like, learning from other cultures that are not our own. I think it's, like, there's always been cultural knowledge exchange since the beginning of time, probably. I'm not a historian, but probably. And so, yeah, I think that's totally valid and worthy to explore. I think, like, searching for people who are of that culture is always a good starting point in terms of finding a teacher. Just because, and it was cut out of the interview with Terry, but Terry explains that she has tried to maintain a career, a professional career as a dance teacher in this city, and hasn't been able to because there's dancers' fees, there's all these barriers. She was dancing with a studio at one point, and they dropped her class, and so she hasn't been able to actually maintain a class as a teacher. And so it kind of speaks to some of the barriers of that Black people face in this city in terms of, you know, maintaining a class. And then that means that the people who can maintain classes sometimes aren't Black. And so it's hard for that reason to find the teachers, but if you can find teachers who, and whether it's Black dance or any other ethnicity, just being able to kind of find somebody who is of that culture, because there's a good chance that they might be struggling to, keep up a class, have, maintain participants, and things like that. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I actually had another question for you.
Please do.
It was about 7 years ago that you came to Victoria, correct?
Yes.
And although your film is more recent, I'm just wondering how you feel now versus when you arrived 7 years ago. What do you see? How do you feel with what you see now?
Yeah, okay, that's a really good question because Victoria's gotten a lot more diverse. Even since I moved here, which I guess now it's 8 years, huge difference in terms of, I guess, a lot of new immigrants to the city and things like that. I remember it just used to be like Quadra Village. You go to Quadra Village and see all the brown people. Go to Fairway, get your like ethnic groceries, and then that was it. But now it's like walking downtown, everywhere I see a lot more people of color. And for that reason, I do see a lot more initiatives happening. I know there's groups locally, like Black youth groups and groups around Afro-textured hair for girls in schools. So there's a lot of really cool things going on. I will say, there's a potential that I just wasn't as tapped in 8 years ago, and maybe I just through, being involved with community know more now, but I do get the sense that there is a lot more kind of like energy and movement around, just Black life in general here.
So what can we do to support that continued evolvement that you've seen? What do we do ourselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's like 1,000,001 different things. I think just looking at kind of what's happening, local initiatives that are happening, or calls for support and just supporting those. I think it's amazing that there's a social justice committee here already, so that's like a really good starting point. And just like kind of staying tapped into what's happening in the community, because there's definitely a lot happening, and just seeing in what ways you can get involved and support. Yeah.
Do we have any chat questions?
Thanks for the beautiful film. The professor, and I apologize for not knowing his name, in the film talked about colonization of lands and bodies. Can you say more about the colonization of bodies? I think it's something we're not talking about.
Yeah, for sure. I was a student of his class, and so I felt like I really needed to be on it. But yeah, I think in that he's talking about the ways that, like, if we look, for example, locally in the context that we're in, the colonization of people is in order to get access to the land. And so, like, what we've seen with, like, cultural genocide and things like that, residential schools, you know, it's all about removing people from land, or kind of like colonizing people's relationship to the land to get access to it. And so I think in a broader context, and he's from Africa, he's talking about the ways that, like, in our culture is encompassed, like, all of our dances. And he also comes from a community where they have a lot of traditional dances, masked dances, dances that are connected to their governance systems. And so their dances are very much a part of their culture in a way that I find in North America, it's like maybe a little bit more siloed off. You know, you go to the dance studio and then you dance and then you go out and you do the rest of your life sort of thing. And so I think that he was talking about the ways that when our bodies are colonized and we're not, you know, we're disconnected from traditional dances, things like that, that is, on a broader sense, connected to our disconnection from land. I know it's a very, like, roundabout answer, but another way that I can speak to it is by saying that one of the tensions around when I was interviewing Lynn from Moondance Dynamic Arts was that they do trips to Africa, and they learn these traditional dances and things like that, which is, like, amazing and beautiful. But as somebody who is from the African diaspora, who's, you know, my dad's from Trinidad by way of, you know, transatlantic slave trade, originally from Africa, you know, I'm so far disconnected from what my original traditional dances would have been. Like, I have no idea. We don't even know where we're from, right? Just because it's almost impossible with the records and everything and what boat you're on and all those sort of things. And so that's something that I think a lot of Black people, especially in the diaspora, have to grieve, is that we will never know. You know, we'll never know what our original dances were. We just won't. And so I think that when I was talking about those tensions and that, like, visceral, like, oh, I just feel angry, it's like a lot of us will never have access to that. And so watching people who are not of African descent in any way going and having access to it, it's like, I'm happy for you, but I'm not happy for me, sort of thing. Yeah, and so that kind of ties into, like, land, disconnection from culture, and all those different things. I might have, like, answered it with, like, 4 more questions, potentially, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, thanks for that documentary and sharing that. I was wondering, what do you feel like there is becoming a bit of a scene of Black dancers in Victoria that's self-sustaining? What leads people to stay and try to build that?
Yeah, as of right now, I don't see any more than when I created the film. I think, you know, as Jasmine explained in her interview, it can be sometimes a bit of a hostile environment, even in spaces like, you know, hip-hop spaces where, you know, hip-hop, it comes from Black culture, and yet when it's predominantly white spaces, sometimes Black folks step into those classes and like they feel awkward or they don't even feel comfortable, or sometimes other folks are like looking at them like expecting them to get it or to get to be like really good because they're like, oh, well, you're Black, you know, and just these little like microaggressions that just make it kind of like an uncomfortable environment. And so some Black dancers just don't really sustain in those environments. They're just like, this is kind of stressful. I think there's definitely like Black dancers like here and there doing really cool things, but in terms of coming together and doing something together, I don't know of anything happening right now. Another really interesting thread was that the dance studio that Jasmine was talking about, the hip hop studio that she was talking about her experiences and reflecting, Devi, the professor, when we saw his daughter dance, she's at the same studio now. And so she's like 8 or 9. And so it was really interesting to see that continuity as well. And she's watched the documentary. She knows she's a superstar in it and everything. But I wanted to create the film as well to kind of like document those things. And hopefully that she can, you know, if she has, you know, like hopefully not, but any like negative experiences or anything like that, she can look at this and say, oh, people have been through this before. I'm not the only one. It's not just me, you know, and kind of like either let that be like a fire under her to keep going and dance, or to say, you know, that's okay. This isn't my space, but, you know, I'm not going to put it on myself, sort of thing. Yeah. Thanks for that question.
I noticed in your bio you're also a doula, is that right?
Yeah.
And so I just wondered if being a dancer and a doula, and you're talking about colonizing bodies, if there's some connected themes there for you?
Yeah, okay. Don't even get me started. I'm like, I will never stop. Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons that I got into doing birth work is because of the really tough experiences that a lot of Black and Indigenous women have in the healthcare system, specifically in, you know, in birth and postpartum. And, you know, we see like a lot of, you might have seen the articles come up recently around like apprehensions happening in the hospitals and things like that. And I got really excited about the possibility of being there and like being somebody who could be like an advocate, a supportive presence in those moments. And so, yeah, I work with the Nesting Doula Collective. Actually, they're really, really awesome. We're a collective of Black, Indigenous, and people of color doulas, and we support all BIPOC birth givers. And yeah, we work with like an anti-oppressive framework, so we try and be really accessible. In 2019, we did a fundraiser and raised $30,000 to fund 30 births. And so 30 BIPOC birth givers got a doula for free in 2020. And so basically how it works is that we fundraise through our collective so that we can pay our doulas so that our clients don't have to pay. And so it's been really, really beautiful to see just kind of that initiative come together as well. And absolutely, just so many commonalities. I think, yeah, we live under structures that make it sometimes really hard to be ourselves, that make it really hard to, you know, stay connected to who we are and feel good about that. And have autonomy over our bodies. And so, yeah, birth work and decolonizing dance feel pretty, sometimes I feel like I say it and people are like, but in my head I'm like, yeah, it's all connected. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm just gonna sip this water.
I'm just thinking about like the burgeoning Black Lives Matter movement, and it's come to Canada. There was a bit of a scene here 2 summers ago, and just wondered if there's been some kind of collective action or mutual support that's risen out of that, or if that's part of the dance world or your world.
Yeah, I have to say I'm not connected with like the local sort of movement for Black Lives. I think I used to do a lot of just like more activism in that way, like in the way that we tend to recognize it, like out in the street sort of things with posters and signs. And I think that's really, it's still valid and it's still absolutely needed. But I think after doing it for a number of years, I realized that I need to do a form of activism that felt more sustainable and more nourishing, and just working in relationships that felt like really nourishing and really focused on care instead of focused on emergency. I know that can really like feel hard to refuse, but I think the things that keep our communities strong are those small connections over time. Hey, I heard you're sick, like I'm gonna bring you a meal, those sort of things. And so I've just focused a lot of my work around birth work and supporting our communities, making sure that our birthing people and folks who are postpartum, who often don't have a lot of support, are supported, have everything that they need, and I put a lot of my effort behind that. And so, yeah, I can't really speak too much to the sort of local organizing around that. But I don't think that it's connected to dance in any way. I think if it was, I would probably know. Yeah, good question though.
You talked about the space that's needed for Black dancers to feel more comfortable to practice their art, because if they're going into spaces that are predominantly traditionally white spaces, it's just not comfortable. So what would need to happen to create a facility or a place? Like I'm gathering from what you're saying that it wouldn't be the ability to have classes in a recreation center or an existing facility. It would need to be a new space, perhaps, that was started for that specific purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of Black dancers in the city who are doing very interesting things in their own pockets. I think there are a couple who are working out of community centers, and I think that's might be going really well. There's been whisperings in the community for like many years about creating a Black community center. I don't know where that's at right now. I think it's one of those like slow builds that maybe is just taking a lot of time. I would love to see that. I think that would be super, super cool. Just a space, like a hub for culture and childcare and all the things. But yeah, I'll let you know if I hear anything about it. But like, yes. I haven't heard about it either. Yeah.
Any more questions? Nothing from the chat? Okay. No? So Simone, I just want to thank you very much for coming and spending your time with us tonight, and just giving us some insight into the experiences that you live with on a daily basis. I'm happy that it's becoming more positive, but I just found your film was really moving on a lot of levels, and I guess part of that was because I have seen some African dance and drumming before, and it was just so interesting to follow their lives, but also when you spoke to, I think it was Dr. Denise?
Or Devi Musina?
Yes.
The professor?
The professor.
Yeah.
Yes. Just how he explained why, and your comments about why it is so hard, that visceral experience that we can put off, but you live with every day. So I just thank you for sharing your story and coming to allow us to have some insight into that. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.